Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we'll be looking at DAX aggregate functions. So aggregate functions allow you to calculate a single value such as count, sum, average, minimum or maximum. And the aggregate functions that we'll be looking at are average, average A and AVERAGEX functions. Okay, so firstly the average function. So what does the function do? It calculates the average of a set of numbers in a column. When to use this function? Use this function when you have a column of numerical data and you need to find the average value. Okay, the syntax is straightforward. The name of your function, average, followed by an opening parenthesis, the name of your column, and a closing parenthesis. Okay, next up let's look at an example. So let's calculate the average of the sales amount in the sales table. So let me just show you quickly the data that we'll be calculating. Over to the sales table here, I've got sales amount, cost, discount, region and product category, and this is the column that we'd like to calculate the average on. So back into our report view, let's right click on our table, select new measure. I'll give a measure name, average sales. Okay, and then the name of my function, average. As soon as I type, you see the auto complete there. Let me just select my function name, average, and then you also have autocomplete of a description of the function. And here we've got a list of all the column names, so I need to specify my column. So I start typing my sales table because I know the column is in the sales table, and I can then scroll down to the sales amount column. Okay, sales amount, add the closing parenthesis. Okay, the measure has been created. Let's add it to our report and see the data. Change that into a table visual. Let me just increase the value size, the font size to 20, the column size 20 as well, so you can see well the data. Okay, so there you go. We've got the average sales calculated. Let's analyze that by product category. Okay, so that's the average sales calculated using the average function. So moving on to our next function, average A function. So what does this function do? So it's similar to average, but it also includes text and logical values. For text, it identifies it as 0. For true and false, it treats true as 1 and false for 0. So for example, you have a data set like this, transaction IDs, the amount column that contains both numerical and non-numerical values. So for numerical values, it's going to identify that as the numerical value as is. For example, 1 and 20, it's going to identify it as 1 and 20. If it's a text value, it will identify it as 0. If it's null, it's going to be 0, and if it's true, it's going to be 1. So when to use this function, you use this function when your column contains numbers, text and logical values. Okay, the syntax, average, the name of the function, average A, followed by an opening and closing parenthesis and your column name. Now next up, let's look at an example demo. So going back to our example use case, for example, we've got this data set here, transaction ID, amount and amount column. If we were to use the average A function to calculate the average of this column here, what PowerBI will do is that it will identify the values 1, 20, this is going to be 0. Okay, the null value is going to be a 0 and the true value will count as 1. Okay, when calculating the average of these values, it's going to be 1 plus 20 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 divided by 5. The average A value for the values in this column here is going to be 4. Okay, but however, you can use average if you don't want to include the non-numeric data. Okay, so for example, if you use average on this column here, amount, what PowerBI will do is that it will just take into consideration the numerical values. So 1 plus 20 divided by 2, the average for this column would be 10.5. Okay, and moving over to our final function, AVERAGEX function. So what does this function do? Well, it calculates the average set of values, evaluating an expression for each row in a table. So when to use this function? when you need to perform more complex calculations on each row of your table before averaging the result. Okay, the syntax, you have your function name, AVERAGEX, opening parentheses, the name of the table, comma, and your expression. Okay, say for example you want to calculate the average profit in the sales table. So let's quickly look at our sales table. So in the sales table we have the sales amount, cost, discount, region, and product category. So this is the column that we want to perform our calculations on, the sales amount and the cost. Going back to the report view, let's create our measure. Just paste that in to speed things up. So we have the AVERAGEX function. We're working on the sales table, and our expression is the sales amount minus the sales cost. Okay, so let's go back into the data view and let me show you what PowerBI is going to do. So what PowerBI will do is that it will calculate for each row the sales amount minus the cost. It will do that for each row. Once it calculates or evaluates for each row right to the end of the data set, it gets the result, and then it will average the result and change it to a table visual. Analyze that by region. Let me just increase the font of the values up to 20, and the column headers as well. And there you go, the AVERAGEX function. So, and finally, a summary of our functions. The average, you use that when you want to perform straightforward numeric average calculations. AVERAGE, you use that when your data includes numbers, text, and logical values, and you need to consider these values in your calculation. And finally, AVERAGEX for any advanced row-by-row calculations where each row's value is derived from an expression before averaging. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you got some value in this video. If so, please consider supporting the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.